I know you've seen it. The flight attendants take the jump seats for takeoff and landing, and then they do something strange. They sit on their hands, or they cross their hands in their laps in a way that looks rehearsed, almost unnatural. You've noticed it on every flight you've ever taken, and the airline never explains it. The safety briefing tells you about seatbelts and oxygen masks. It never tells you about the hands. There is a reason they sit like that, and that reason comes from a hidden protocol called the brace position. But not the brace position you heard about. This is a brace position designed for the crew, and it is the product of decades of accidents, investigations, and one specific change in regulation that the passenger cabin never learned about. Let's start with what you see. The flight attendant is seated on the forward-facing jump seat, often the one attached to the galley wall or the crew rest area. She is wearing a 5-point harness, which is fundamentally different from your lap belt. A 5-point harness has straps over both shoulders, across the lap, and between the legs. It locks the torso to the seat frame. When she sits on her hands, she tucks them under her thighs or under the harness straps themselves, palms down, fingers straight. Why are the hands so important? Because in an impact, your body does what physics demands. It goes forward. The arms, being the lightest and most mobile part of the upper body, whip forward like uncontrolled ropes. In a sudden deceleration, an untrained flight attendant's hands can slam into the galley counter, the overhead bin, or the bulkhead with enough force to fracture bones. And here is the part the airlines do not tell you. A flight attendant with broken hands cannot operate the cabin. She cannot open the emergency exit. She cannot pull the slide release handle. She cannot help you. Think about that for a moment. Every single flight you have ever taken, those hands were tucked away not for comfort, but for a scenario where seconds decide survival. If that revelation makes you want to see the rest of the cabin's hidden protocols, subscribe so you do not miss the next layer. And in the comments, write hands under thighs if you have sat through a takeoff and wondered why they sit that way. I want to know how many of you have been watching without knowing. This is not speculation. The brace position for cabin crew was prescribed by the International Civil Aviation Organization after a series of accidents where crew members survived the initial impact but were incapacitated by flailing limb injuries. One of the landmark studies came from the 1989 United Airlines Flight 232 crash in Sioux City, Iowa. That DC-10 broke apart during an emergency landing, and the flight attendants who survived reported that their brace position saved their ability to function in the post-crash environment. The ones who did not brace lost the use of their hands. Now, Layer 2. The brace position is not just about the hands under the thighs. It is about the head against the seat back. The FA is instructed to place the back of her head firmly against the seat frame, chin slightly down, such that the spine is aligned and the neck is braced. That position absorbs forward and downward G-forces without whiplash. But you, the passenger, have never been told to brace your head against the seat in front of you. Why? Because passengers have lap belts, not 5-point harnesses. A passenger who puts their head against the seat back in front of them might not clear the seat ahead if it collapses. The passenger brace position is hands on the seat in front of you, head against your hands. Different physics. Here is where it gets unsettling. There is a third layer to this hand-tucking behavior that most pilots do not openly discuss with passengers, but it is written clearly in the cabin crew manual. The flight attendant is also trained to lock her feet flat on the floor, knees together, pressed backward into the jump seat cushion. This is called the containment position. The goal is to turn the entire body into a single rigid block that minimizes relative motion between the skeleton and the seat frame. If the body can move independently of the seat, the spine can shear. So the hands stay locked, the feet stay planted, the head stays back. The flight attendant becomes a statue. And then there is the fourth layer, the one that connects directly to the passengers. The flight attendant sitting on her hands during takeoff and landing is not only protecting herself, she is also protecting the person next to her. The jump seat is often positioned near the emergency exit, with the galley directly behind. In a rejected takeoff at high speed, the FA can slide forward and hit the handle suddenly. An untrained slip could trigger the slide release inside the cabin, deploying the evacuation slide into a confined space. That is a catastrophic failure. By locking her hands under her thighs, she ensures that her upper body does not drift forward into the controls. Now, here is the self-recognition beat. If you have ever watched a flight attendant during takeoff and felt a quiet unease because her posture looked so rigid, so unnatural, you were right to notice. That discomfort you felt was your brain detecting an anomaly. The FA is not relaxed. She is not casual. She is in a combat-ready state, coiled for a specific scenario that you have never rehearsed. You have been on 300 flights and you have seen this posture 300 times, but you never knew what it meant. That is exactly how the system is designed to work. You see the surface. The crew lives in the hidden layer. You are now seeing what you were never meant to see. The line between the passenger world and the crew world. If you want to keep crossing that line with every video, subscribe and never miss another secret written into the cabin. And in the comments, write hidden layer if you now understand that the crew operates in a reality separate from yours. I want to know how many of you are ready to become informed observers. But here is what most aviation enthusiasts still get wrong. The brace position is not only about surviving the crash, it is about being functional after the crash. This distinction is critical. The passenger brace position, hands on the seat in front, head on hands, is designed so that you can undo your seatbelt quickly and exit. If your arms are flailing, you may survive the impact, but you cannot reach the buckle. The crew brace position is designed so that they can open the door, command the evacuation, and deploy the slide within seconds. The difference between a survivable accident and a lethal one is often measured in the time it takes to open the first exit, and that exit requires working hands. Let me give you the concrete number. FAA Advisory Circular 120-88B specifies that cabin crew must be able to initiate an evacuation within 15 seconds of the aircraft coming to a stop. 15 seconds. If the FA has a fractured wrist or a dislocated thumb, that window expands to minutes. And by then, smoke or fire can make the cabin uninhabitable. So every millisecond of that brace position is engineered to protect the one thing that matters most, not their comfort, their ability to function. Now, here is where the rule gets even more specific. You may have noticed that not all flight attendants adopt exactly the same hand position. Some sit on their hands. Some cross their wrists under the thighs. Some place their hands on their thighs with the palms facing up. These variations are not random. They reflect different airline procedures, different aircraft configurations, and different harness types. In some Boeing aircraft, the jump seat has a center buckle that requires the hands to be crossed under the lap belt to keep them clear. In Airbus models, the 5-point harness is routed differently, and the hands may be tucked between the straps. But the principle is always the same. The hands cannot be free to whip. there is one specific incident that changed the industry standard. It happened in 1987 with Northwest Airlines Flight 255. During takeoff from Detroit, the MD-82 stalled and crashed. The extremely violent impact killed 156 people. The only survivor was a 4-year-old child. But the National Transportation Safety Board investigation found something that changed everything. The flight attendant who died was not wearing her shoulder harness properly. She had loosened it for comfort during the taxi. When the crash happened, her upper body pivoted forward and her head struck the overhead panel, causing fatal trauma. The NTSB explicitly recommended that all cabin crew members be required to wear full 5-point harnesses during takeoff and landing, and that hand positioning be standardized. That recommendation became FAA regulation, and from that point on, the brace position for flight attendants was no longer optional. It was a mandatory procedure. The hand tucking became part of the pre-departure safety check, verified by the lead flight attendant. They literally check each other's hand position before the aircraft begins the takeoff roll. If you look closely while boarding, you will see one FAA glance at another and nod. That nod is the signal that the hands are locked. Now, here is the layer that connects this to the oxygen mask timer from the previous video. Both procedures exist for the same reason. The airline industry learned through blood that passengers and crew live in different safety worlds. The passenger's oxygen mask has a 12-minute timer because you are expected to be below 10,000 feet within 12 minutes after a depressurization. But the pilot's mask has a different supply and a different procedure because they must fly the aircraft at high altitude for longer. Similarly, the passenger brace position is a simplified version because passengers are not trained to lock their heads against the seat back. The crew brace position is complex because they have harnesses and because they must be operational. Write this in the comments if you have noticed the hand tucking but never understood it. I want to know at what moment during this explanation you realize that every flight you have taken had a hidden layer. Now, I am going to show you something that changes how you see the cabin. The flight attendant's brace position is not static, it is dynamic, and it changes with the phase of flight. During taxi, the hands are on the lap but not locked. During the takeoff roll, they go under the thighs. During climb out, they can be released. During descent, they are re-engaged. And during landing, they go back under the thighs. But there is a little known rule that applies only during the final approach. The crew must adopt the brace position at least 1 minute before touchdown. The FAA and EASA mandate that this position is held from 1,000 feet above ground level until the aircraft has come to a complete stop. That means that for the entire final approach, if you look through the galley curtain, you will see the flight attendants sitting in statue mode, hands locked, heads back, eyes forward. And here is the uncomfortable truth. They are not looking at the passengers. They are not looking at the cabin. They are looking straight ahead at the bulkhead wall or the galley partition, and they are mentally rehearsing the evacuation procedures. In the last minute of the approach, a flight attendant's brain runs through what they call the silent review. They visualize the door handle location, the arming lever, the slide status, the exit routes. They rehearse the commands and the emergency phraseology. They do not smile, they do not chat. They are in the zone. Now imagine sitting in seat 12B, looking at a flight attendant who is perfectly still, hands invisible, eyes fixed, and you assume they are just waiting. They are not waiting. They are preparing for the worst-case scenario that they have trained for hundreds of times in simulators. The brace position is the final step in that preparation. It is the physical equivalent of holding your breath before a dive. There is a special consideration for flight attendants who have physical limitations. Pregnancy, for example, changes the brace position. A pregnant FA cannot tuck her hands under her thighs in the same way because the abdomen changes the center of gravity. Some airlines allow a modified position with hands crossed on the lap and shoulders tucked forward. But the wrists must still be held rigid so they do not swing uncontrolled. This is documented in the Federal Aviation Regulation, Part 121, Appendix A for flight attendant crew member training. If you are a frequent flyer, you have likely noticed another detail. The flight attendant on the aft jump seat, the one facing backward, has a slightly different brace position. The backward-facing seat is considered the safest position in the cabin because it distributes crash forces across the entire back. But it also changes the hand position. The FA on a backward-facing seat often places her hands on the harness straps rather than under the thighs because the direction of force pushes her into the seat back, not away from it. The forward-facing seat is the one where the hands are most vulnerable. So next time you board a flight, look at the jump seat configuration. Is it forward or backward? If it is forward, the hands are at risk. If it is backward, the hands are protected by the seat geometry. These are the details that transform a passenger into an informed observer. And here is the thing that still surprises even aviation enthusiasts. The brace position for flight attendants is not uniform across all airlines. In Europe, under EASA regulations, the brace position is often described as arms crossed across the chest with hands on the shoulders. This is different from the US FAA version where hands go under the thighs. The difference exists because seat designs vary and the harness routing changes the safest hand position. But both versions share the same principle. The hands must be contained. I want you to remember this next time you fly. When the flight attendant sits on her hands during the takeoff roll, she is not just following a checklist. She is performing a highly specific survival action that has been refined by decades of accident data. And you, sitting in your seat, have been missing the meaning of that gesture for your entire flying life. Now you see it, and you will never unsee it. The people who sit on their hands are the guardians of your exit. They are preparing to open the door that you will never open yourself. And they do it by locking their own body into a position that sacrifices comfort for function. That is the rule the pilots created, and the passengers never knew it existed. Here is one specific piece of evidence that I want to give you right now, because it ties the entire procedure to something you have heard but never understood. In 1996, the FAA commissioned a study of cabin crew survivability in impact scenarios. They dropped a decommissioned DC-9 fuselage on a runway, instrumented with crash dummies in jump seats. The results were something the industry held close. The dummies that were not in the brace position recorded spinal loads in excess of 800 Gs. The ones that were braced recorded less than 300 Gs. That difference is not academic. That is the gap between walking away and never walking again. Now, let me take you to a specific aircraft type that reveals the hidden complexity. On the Boeing 737 family, the most common aircraft in the world, there is a unique characteristic of the forward jump seat. It sits directly behind the cockpit door. And the cockpit door is not a normal door. It is a bullet-resistant, axe-proof reinforced barrier that weighs nearly 100 pounds. If the flight attendant on that jump seat is not braced properly during an impact, her uncontrolled body can hit that door, forcing it open. That door is the last line of defense against a hostile intrusion during flight. But during a crash, it becomes a blunt force weapon. The brace position in this case protects the cockpit integrity as much as it protects the crew member. There is a second layer to this that most pilots do not talk about on the intercom. When the flight attendant braces on the forward jump seat, they are trained to keep their head turned slightly to the left. The reason is simple. The forward left side of the cabin is where the emergency exit handle for the cockpit door is located. If the pilots are incapacitated, that flight attendant must be able to open the door from the outside within seconds. Turning the head left while braced keeps the cervical spine aligned with that exit point, reducing reaction time. It is a micro adjustment that saves precious tenths of a second. And then there is the sound. During a rejected takeoff, the aircraft decelerates so abruptly that the cabin experiences a phenomenon called gear screech. It is a high-pitched metal-on-metal sound that comes from the brakes absorbing kinetic energy equivalent to a freight train. The flight attendants have been trained to ignore that sound. It is a distraction. They must keep their hands locked, their eyes forward, and their brain focused on the procedure, not on the auditory chaos. The brace position is a physical anchor against the sensory overload of an emergency. Let me give you a final thought on the hidden architecture behind what you see. The brace position is not just a set of instructions for takeoff and landing. It is a system that has produced a measurable outcome. According to the FAA's Cabin Safety Compendium, flight attendants who properly brace during impact events are 70% more likely to remain uninjured compared to those who are caught off guard. That 70% is the entire reason the procedure exists. It is the most effective single action a crew member can take to preserve their ability to function. Write this in the comments if you have ever seen a flight attendant during landing with her hands tucked and wondered why she looked so tense. The answer is that she looks tense because she is tense. And her tension is your protection. Now, I want to show you how the passenger brace position, the one you were taught in the safety card, connects directly to what the flight attendant does. The passenger version is hands on the seat in front of you, head on your hands. It is designed to do exactly one thing: stop your head from hitting the seat back with enough force to cause a closed head injury. The FAA analysis of survivable accidents found that the most common fatal injury is not chest trauma or limb fracture. It is a brain injury caused by the head striking the seat structure in front. The passenger brace position is a direct response to that autopsy finding. The crew brace position is a response to a different set of injuries, flailing limb fractures, because their job requires functional arms. Here is the part that even accident investigators sometimes overlook. The brace position works only if the seat in front of you does not collapse. And seats do collapse. In high-energy impacts, the seat tracks can deform, the seat legs can shear, and the passenger in the row ahead can become a projectile. The brace position is designed assuming the seat remains in place. When the seat fails, the brace position transforms. This is why the passenger brace position is called a position of vulnerability in some safety reports. It works when the system works. It fails when the system fails. But the crew brace position, because of the 5-point harness, is designed to hold the crew member to a structure that is bolted directly to the floor. It is a fundamentally different survival geometry. If you have flown long haul, you have seen the flight attendants strapped into the jump seat during the final approach over the ocean. There is a specific procedure for water landings. The brace position remains the same. Hands under thighs, head back. But the mental preparation changes. The crew rehearses the ditching procedure instead of the evacuation. They visualize the life raft deployment, the slide raft separation, the boarding sequence. The brace position is the same because the physics of sudden deceleration is the same whether you stop on land or water. But the survival window changes. On land, you have minutes. On water, you have hours, depending on temperature. The brace position is the constant factor across every emergency scenario. So when you look at the cabin on your next flight, you will see the flight attendants in that rigid posture. You will understand why their hands disappear under their thighs. You will know that they are not just sitting. They are locking their bodies into a position that has been tested in the most extreme conditions that an aircraft can survive. And you will also know that the airline does not want you to think about this. It is a secret hidden in plain sight, explained only in the crew manual. I will leave you with this. The next time you hear the seatbelt chime and the flight attendant takes her seat, watch her hands. She cannot see you watching. She is looking straight ahead. But now you know what she is doing. She is preparing for a scenario that she hopes will never happen. And she is doing it right in front of you on every flight, every time. This is the kind of insider knowledge that transforms how you experience every single flight. If you want to keep unlocking these hidden protocols, the ones the airlines never tell you, subscribe and stay with this channel. And in the comments, write 15 seconds if you now understand that the entire brace position is engineered to beat that evacuation clock. I want to see how many of you are ready to never watch a takeoff the same way again. There is a single moment that haunts every flight attendant. It does not appear in any training manual, but every senior crew member knows it by instinct. It is the moment just after the aircraft stops moving, when the cabin is silent and the adrenaline is still flooding. In that moment, the brace position ends and the real test begins. The hands come out from under the thighs. The harness unlatches, and in less than 15 seconds, that same person who was frozen in statue pose is now commanding an evacuation, shouting commands into the chaos, pulling handles, and guiding passengers toward exits they have never opened. The brace position is never about surviving the impact. It is about surviving what comes after. The hands are protected not so they can heal, but so they can work. The head is braced not so it can rest, but so it can think clearly. The containment position exists so that the body can transition from passive passenger to active rescuer without a single hesitation. And that transition depends entirely on the discipline of maintaining the brace position down to the last second before the aircraft stops. Here is what the research shows. The University of Newcastle conducted a study on passenger evacuation behavior in smoke-filled cabins. They found that passengers who had not rehearsed the brace position took an average of 4 seconds longer to undo their seatbelt during an evacuation. 4 seconds. In a cabin fire, that is the difference between clearing the aircraft and being overcome by toxic fumes. The brace position is not just a posture. It is a rehearsal mechanism. Every time you put your head on your hands during a safety briefing rehearsal, you are literally priming your nervous system to perform the same motion under stress. The flight attendants understand this at a depth that no passenger ever reaches. When they tuck their hands, they are not just protecting tissue. They are completing a ritual that triggers muscle memory. Their body already knows what to do. The brace position is the final step in a sequence that begins hours before the aircraft pushes back. It began when the crew reviewed the safety equipment during the pre-flight inspection. It continued during the silent review on the final approach. And it ends when the aircraft stops and the hands come out. So the next time you see a flight attendant sitting with her hands tucked, look at her face. It is not fear that you see. It is focus. It is the face of someone who has run the simulation 1,000 times in her head and is now trusting her body to run it for real. And when the aircraft reaches the gate, the seatbelt sign dings off and she stands up with a smile. That smile is not relief. It is acknowledgement that her preparation worked once again without being needed. That is the hidden system that the airline never tells you about. It is engineered into every procedure, every regulation, and every hand position you have ever seen in the cabin. The brace position is not a suggestion. It is a survival architecture built from accident reports, crash tests, and the quiet discipline of people who strap themselves in every single time, knowing that the moment they hope never comes is the one they are paid to be ready for. And now you see what you were never meant to see. The hands are not resting. They are locked. The head is not relaxed. It is braced. The posture is not casual. It is a combat position refined over decades. And every time the aircraft accelerates down the runway, the crew is already ahead of you, not just flying the plane, but protecting the exits with their own body. The next time you hear the click of the seatbelt sign and feel the engine spool up, consider this. You are looking at two different worlds separated by a curtain. One world is prepared. The other world is about to learn why the brace position exists. You are now in the first world, and you will never watch a takeoff the same way again.